Welcome to the deep dive. This is where your curiosity really drives our exploration. You send us the sources, and, well, we dig in and pull out the essential knowledge you're looking for quickly and hopefully in an engaging way.
That's the goal.
So today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental, the foundations of, well, your well-being. We're going to trace how humans have evolved, looking at everything from our ancestral diets and ways of thinking right up to the unique challenges we face today.
And we've got a really fascinating mix of information to work with. It spans, ancient human remains, the latest in brain science, even the therapeutic side of psychedelics.
Yeah.
Quite a range.
It really is. Our mission here essentially is to figure out how that deep evolutionary history shapes our health struggles now. And maybe more importantly, can we find some potential solutions? For eating better, thinking more clearly, just feeling better overall.
Makes sense.
Ever found yourself wondering, like, why does that food give me energy, but this one just makes me crash? Or why is it so hard sometimes to just focus?
Yeah, the modern world pulls us in a million directions.
Exactly. So this deep dive, it's about unpacking those very questions. Let's get into it.
What's really striking, I think, is the sheer time scale we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hundreds of thousands of years shaping our biology, our metabolism, even how our brains are wired.
Right.
And the sources you've gathered, they really highlight these huge shifts, especially, when agriculture came along and then much more recently, the whole industrial food system and, well, the information age.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with what we might call our ancestral blueprint. For most of human history, we were hunter-gatherers.
The vast majority, yeah.
And the picture we get from the information is one of incredible dietary variety. Just imagine foraging all sorts of wild plants, fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, tubers, plus whatever animals or fish you could get.
Sounds pretty good, honestly, like a nutritional goldmine.
Right. Packed with everything. And they weren't, tracking their macros or anything, but they were eating seasonally, which just makes perfect sense when you rely directly on what nature provides.
Totally.
So I think a key takeaway for us looking back is that variety. It wasn't just about what was available, it probably played a massive role in their health. And it's something, well, often missing from our modern diets, which can be pretty repetitive.
That's a crucial point, that dietary diversity is paramount, really. Our bodies evolved expecting this wide spectrum of nutrients from loads of different sources. It meant getting all the essential vitamins and minerals, sure, but also exposure to all these beneficial plant compounds, phytochemicals. It's that natural variability in nutrient density that's just so different from what came later.
And the physical evidence, it seems to back this up, right? Looking at skeletons from pre-Neolithic Europe, those folks were generally taller than the early farmers who followed.
Yeah, by about 4 centimeters on average, which is noticeable.
It really is. Now, obviously, genetics and environment matter too. There were regional differences. But it strongly suggests, well, a different nutritional world back then.
It does raise that question, doesn't it? What does that height difference really mean? Nutrition is a huge factor in growth. So them being taller hints that, on average, their diet might have supported more robust growth, at least in those early years.
Okay, and then there's their teeth. You'd imagine with coarser food, using teeth as tools, you'd think their dental health would be terrible.
Right. But, surprisingly, cavities. Generally pretty rare.
The global average was, what, like 1.7% for hunter-gatherers? Even the Natufians, who were starting to settle a bit, were only around 6.4%.
Yeah, low numbers. It seems the diet being lower in those sticky fermentable carbs was a big factor.
Although you did see exceptions, right? If a group got lots of honey or sweet fruits, cavity rates could tick up.
Sure, that makes sense. But what's fascinating is the contrast. They definitely had more wear on their teeth.
From the tougher diet, yeah.
Exactly. But less decay. It just highlights how critical what they were eating, or maybe what they weren't eating, much of those refined carbs that feed bad bacteria really was for oral health.
And bone health, kind of a similar story.
Yeah, greater skeletal robusticity. Suggests a pretty physically demanding life.
Makes sense.
There's a bit of debate in the research we looked at regarding osteoarthritis, though. Was it worse for hunter-gatherers because of intense activity, or for Neolithic farmers doing repetitive work?
Ah, so different kinds of stress. Hunter-gatherers maybe doing more varied, intense bursts, farmers more repetitive labor.
Precisely. Both could lead to joint issues, but maybe in different ways, affecting different joints. It highlights the trade-offs in lifestyle.
And what about that classic image of hunter-gatherers constantly facing feast and famine?
Well, the newer analyses suggest they might have actually faced less severe famine compared to early agricultural societies.
Really? Why is that?
Diversity, again. They had multiple food sources to fall back on. If one thing wasn't available, they could switch to something else. Early farmers, relying heavily on one or two stable crops, much more vulnerable if those crops failed.
Ah, okay. So that kind of challenges that old thrifty genotype idea a bit, doesn't it? The idea we evolved to store fat efficiently because of constant famine.
It certainly adds nuance to it, yeah. The
Yeah.
picture might be more complex than just constant scarcity.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, yes. Incredible sight.
This pre-pottery Neolithic site built by hunter-gatherers, huge megalithic structures, carvings of wild animals, and evidence they were processing wild cereals, maybe even cultivating them, plus feasting on wild game.
And all those human bone fragments found there, over 700 pieces. Analysis is still ongoing, but wow.
It just completely complicates that simple story of, foragers becoming farmers overnight.
Absolutely. Göbekli Tepe forces us to rethink things. It shows a level of social organization, ritual, resource management among hunter-gatherers that maybe we didn't fully appreciate.
That wild cereal processing is key, isn't it? Suggests the transition to agriculture was maybe more gradual, more blurry than a sudden revolution.
Exactly. A much more nuanced picture is emerging.
Okay, so then comes the Neolithic Revolution proper, around 12,000 years ago. The information calls it a double-edged sword.
Good way to put it.
Because yes, it allowed for settled populations, cities, civilization, but it came with a real hit to health and nutrition.
Right. And a big part of that was the dramatic narrowing of the diet. Suddenly, there's this heavy reliance on just a few staple cereal crops: wheat, barley, rice, maize.
And the nutritional fallout was huge. You lose a lot of those micronutrients and beneficial plant compounds, the phytochemicals, that were so abundant before.
Yeah, and less animal products in many diets meant less readily available zinc, vitamin A, B12, things like that.
And it wasn't just what they lost, it was what they gained, right? These anti-nutrients.
Yes, the phytates, lectins, oxalates found in grains and legumes. These can actually bind to essential minerals, iron, zinc, calcium, and make them harder for our bodies to absorb.
Like phytates blocking iron absorption. That's a classic example.
Exactly. So you've got this double whammy, fewer nutrients coming in overall, and anti-nutrients interfering with the absorption of what is there.
Which likely explains why we see more signs of nutritional deficiencies in Neolithic skeletons.
Precisely. Things like parodic hyperostosis and cribra orbitalia, which are markers for anemia, become much more common.
And specific crops had their issues, like maize being low in iron and essential amino acids, or rice-based diets potentially messing with vitamin A.
Yeah, you can infer other deficiencies too, like B vitamins, calcium, vitamin D, just from the skeletal studies. It points to a widespread nutritional challenge.
And the physical changes continued, like that reduction in stature we mentioned earlier. Almost 4 centimeters shorter in some European Neolithic groups compared to their ancestors.
It's often seen as a marker of chronic undernutrition and just generally increased physiological stress.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about getting enough calories. It was about the quality and diversity and whether your body could actually use them.
And dental health just plummeted.
Took a real nosedive. Those softer, carb-rich foods. Perfect fuel for the bacteria that cause cavities.
So cavities jumped from, less than 2% globally in foragers up to nearly 9% in agriculturalists?
Yeah, a massive increase. It really underscores that the type of food, not just how coarse it is critical for dental health.
Yeah.
More fermentable carbs equals more cavities, basically.
Now, it's important to remember, as the information points out, this wasn't just diet, right? The Neolithic health issues were multifactorial.
Absolutely. The environment changed, too. Things like increased parasite load, diseases like malaria becoming more prevalent in denser populations. We see that in Neolithic Greece, contributing to anemia.
And even modern studies, like the one on the Simon people, show things like early life anemia can have long-lasting effects.
That's a crucial point. The Neolithic wasn't just a diet switch. It was a whole lifestyle revolution. People became more sedentary, lived in denser communities, closer to domesticated animals.
Which created new opportunities for diseases to spread.
Exactly. Zoonotic diseases, pathogen transmission. We see evidence of infections in places like Çatalhöyük, a big contrast to the smaller, more mobile hunter-gatherer bands.
And then there's this potential link between cereal-heavy diets, especially wheat, and leaky gut, increased intestinal permeability and chronic low-grade inflammation.
Yes, things like gluten, specifically gliadin, and wheat germ agglutinin, or WGA. There's evidence they can disrupt the gut barrier and trigger inflammatory responses in some people.
So we might be seeing the ancient roots of some modern inflammatory issues here.
It's plausible. While we can't, directly measure leaky gut in skeletons, the dietary shift certainly created conditions where these kinds of problems could emerge over time.
But again, it wasn't like flipping a switch. The transition was gradual.
Very gradual. We see evidence of domesticated cereals in the dental calculus, basically, fossilized plaque of foragers before full-blown agriculture took hold.
So it varied region by region, the timeline, the health impacts.
Exactly. It wasn't uniform. Different places adopted farming differently at different times, leading to a whole spectrum of outcomes. Shows how adaptable humans are, but also how complex these transitions were.
Okay, so faced with these new nutritional challenges, our ancestors weren't just, sitting ducks. They got clever. They developed all these amazing traditional food processing techniques.
Right. And the information we have emphasizes this wasn't just about taste. It was crucial for detoxification, making nutrients more available, improving storage. It's really quite impressive, this ancestral wisdom.
It really is. Generations of trial and error, essentially, like early biochemistry and microbiology, but without the textbook.
Exactly. Empirically derived knowledge.
So let's look at some specifics. Soaking. Simple, right? Just soaking grains, legumes, and veggies.
Yeah, it helps leach out water-soluble anti-nutrients like some phytates and lectins. Soaking peas for, say, 12 hours can reduce phytates by nearly 10%.
Simple but effective. The longer you soak, maybe change the water, the better.
Generally, yes. It reduces the concentration of those compounds that interfere with nutrient absorption.
Then you've got sprouting or germination.
Letting seeds or grains sprout activates their own enzymes, which then break down anti-nutrients. Phytate reduction can be pretty significant, sometimes over 80%.
Wow. And it can even boost the nutrition profile sometimes.
It can. As the seed starts growing, it converts stored compounds, sometimes making minerals more available or increasing certain vitamins. It's like harnessing the plant's own power to make it better for us.
And fermentation, that's a big one.
Huge. This ancient technique uses microbes, bacteria, yeasts to break down complex stuff, including anti-nutrients. Lactic acid fermentation is great against phytates and lectins.
Like in sourdough bread, right, making it more digestible than standard yeast bread.
Exactly. And fermentation was absolutely critical for making foods like cassava and yam safe to eat by reducing toxins.
It's like the microbes pre-digest the food for us.
In a way, yes. They break down problematic compounds, unlock nutrients, and as a bonus, create new beneficial things like probiotics and postbiotics. It's a real powerhouse.
And just plain old cooking. Boiling, roasting, baking.
Yep. Heat denatures some of those heat-sensitive anti-nutrients and toxins. Boiling taro reduces oxalates significantly. Crucial for cassava, too.
And we find archaeological evidence, like grinding stones, ovens, pottery from Neolithic sites, showing they were doing this early on.
Absolutely. Heat was fundamental. They learned quickly it wasn't just for taste, but for safety and better nutrition, too.
And often they combined methods, didn't they?
Yes, like soaking, then sprouting, then fermenting quinoa to get rid of almost all the phytates, or the complex, multi-step ways cassava is processed in Africa.
It really shows a deep, practical understanding of food chemistry developed over generations, much more than just random trial and error.
It suggests really keen observation. They figured out what worked for their health and well-being.
And beyond just removing the bad stuff, fermentation actually adds good stuff, right? Enhances nutrients.
Totally. Lacto-fermented foods are full of probiotics, live beneficial bacteria that support our gut microbiome.
Which we now know is linked to immunity, digestion, even brain health via that gut-brain axis.
Exactly. Think kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, traditional yogurts, and then you have postbiotics.
Ah, yes, the beneficial compounds the bacteria leave behind, even if the bacteria themselves aren't live anymore, like short-chain fatty acids.
Right. Things like butyrate, acetate, propionate. They have anti-inflammatory effects, support the gut lining. It's a really interesting area. Even the non-living bits have benefits.
And fermentation makes minerals like iron and zinc more available by breaking down phytates.
Yes, and it can even lead to the synthesis of new vitamins, like some B vitamins, vitamin K, and increased essential amino acids. Sourdough having a lower glycemic index is partly related to this too.
So it's not just preservation or detox. It's often a genuine nutritional upgrade.
In many cases, absolutely. More accessible nutrients plus added beneficial compounds.
Now, there is that caveat about histamine in some fermented foods, right, for people with intolerance.
That's important, yes. Fermentation naturally produces biogenic amines, including histamine. While beneficial for most, people with histamine intolerance do need to be careful with certain fermented foods. It depends on the microbes, the ingredients, how long it ferments.
Good to know. And then there are all those long-term preservation methods: drying, smoking, salting, using root cellars.
Essential for food security. Creating an environment where spoilage microbes just can't grow. Allowed people to store food for lean times, travel. Shows a deep understanding of preventing spoilage naturally.
We have examples like pemmican, that indigenous North American mix of dried meat, fat, berries, super stable, nutrient dense.
Or stockfish, the dried Scandinavian fish. Natural process, concentrates nutrients, lasts ages.
Even the Roman fermented fish sauces, garum and liquamen, preservation plus flavor.
And simple things like root cellars, granaries, storage pits, just ingenious ways to manage food supplies.
But nutrient retention must have varied quite a bit depending on the method.
Oh, for sure. Drying can impact some vitamins, though minerals often get concentrated. Freezing is generally good. Canning can cause losses. Smoking adds preservatives, but also potentially carcinogens. Salting dehydrates.
So trade-offs.
Always trade-offs. Our ancestors likely had an intuitive grasp of this, using different methods for different foods and situations.
The information really stresses the ecological wisdom in these practices. It feels very different from modern industrial food processing, which is often focused purely on yield and shelf life above all else.
It is a stark contrast, and there's definitely a growing recognition today that these traditional methods offer benefits for nutrition, for gut health, that might be lost in industrial processing. We're seeing a resurgence of interest.
Yeah, definitely. Now, our info includes a really useful table, Table 1, comparing health and diet markers across these eras: Paleolithic, Neolithic, modern. It neatly sums up the key trends and those trade-offs we've been discussing.
It's great visual. Really drives home the biological consequences of these shifts. Agriculture brought societal complexity, yes, but often at a cost to individual health, especially regarding dietary diversity and disease burden.
Which leads us right into the modern food landscape. A transition, the information says, is even more rapid, even more impactful than the Neolithic one.
And the big player here, ultra-processed foods,
Yeah.
UPFs.
Right. Their rise is just fundamental to how we eat now. These aren't just processed, they're heavily industrialized formulas. Ingredients you wouldn't typically use at home, designed to be, well, irresistible.
Hyper-palatable, convenient, long shelf life. And consumption has just exploded globally. The key thing is how they're engineered to bypass our natural fullness cues. Makes mindful eating incredibly difficult.
And the health impacts are pretty stark. The data links high UPF intake to increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, even overall mortality.
Yeah, the mechanisms are becoming clearer, messing with cholesterol levels, increasing inflammation markers like C-reactive protein, raising triglycerides, impacting blood sugar control.
The evidence is really piling up. High energy density, unhealthy fats, refined sugars, salt, low fiber, low nutrients. It's almost a perfect storm for metabolic problems.
It really is. But it's not just our metabolism, is it? The brain seems to be affected too.
Yeah, that's worrying. Emerging links between lots of UPFs and cognitive issues, higher risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, faster cognitive decline.
And the proposed pathways make sense. Chronic inflammation, changes in the gut microbiome, lack of essential brain nutrients, increased oxidative stress.
Even things like emulsifiers or artificial sweeteners irritating the gut lining, potentially affecting that gut-brain communication highway.
The diet-brain connection is becoming undeniable, and the potential impact of UPFs on our thinking and memory is a major area of concern now.
And this is really concerning. The idea that UPFs might actually rewire brain circuits involved in hunger, reward, feeding behavior.
Yeah, studies are finding associations between high UPF intake and actual changes in brain structure areas, like the nucleus accumbens, hypothalamus, amygdala, potentially leading to this vicious cycle of cravings and overeating, almost regardless of body weight.
Because they're designed to be so highly rewarding, they can hijack our natural satiety signals, right? Leading to these changes that just perpetuate the cycle.
That seems to be the mechanism, yes. Very hard to break out of.
And the immune system takes a hit too.
Seems so. UPFs are typically low in the micronutrients essential for immune function, and high in pro-inflammatory stuff like saturated fats, refined sugars, additives. This could lead to chronic low-grade activation of the innate immune system while potentially suppressing the adaptive response.
making us more vulnerable to infections.
Potentially, yes. A weakened defense system is another likely consequence.
UPS are everywhere, and their negative impacts seem so widespread. It really brings us back to that idea of the gene-diet mismatch.
Exactly. The evolutionary discordance hypothesis. Our genes, shaped over millennia in one environment, are just not well adapted to this modern industrial diet, especially the UPFs. It's seen as a major driver of today's chronic diseases.
And the scale of the change compared to ancestral diets is just mind-boggling. Our information says it's orders of magnitude greater than the Neolithic shift.
It is staggering. Our biology simply hasn't had time to catch up through evolution. This mismatch creates fertile ground for health problems.
Let's stick through some examples. Obesity and metabolic syndrome. Our evolved ability to store energy efficiently, our preference for calorie-dense foods. It becomes a liability when cheap, hyper-palatable UPFs are everywhere and we're less active.
Spot on. That survival advantage in the past can work directly against us now.
Autoimmune diseases and the hygiene hypothesis. Maybe less exposure to diverse microbes early in life, combined with these inflammatory modern diets, is leading to confused, dysregulated immune systems.
That's the thinking. Our immune systems might need that early training for microbes. Modern sanitized lives and diets lacking microbial richness could be contributing factors to rising autoimmune rates.
Cardiovascular disease. That skewed ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats in modern diets fueling inflammation. Plus all the refined sugar and processed fats.
Yeah, that fatty acid imbalance is a huge contributor to chronic inflammation, which is central to heart disease. UPFs just pour fuel on that fire.
And even links to mental health depression, anxiety possibly tied to the inflammatory nature of these diets, and the disruption of the gut-brain axis.
It's a very active area of research. Given the two-way street of the gut-brain axis, the inflammation and microbiome changes from UPS could certainly play a role in mental well-being.
And there's this loss of the evolutionary metabolome. Ancestral diets had this huge diversity of plant compounds, phytonutrients, that industrial processing often strips away. Maybe we're missing crucial things.
Very likely. Our ancestors co-evolved with these plants and their compounds. We're only just beginning to understand the subtle but potentially important roles many of these phytochemicals play in our health. And modern processing introduces novel compounds whose long-term effects we just don't know.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly but stay with this theme of mismatch. Pattern recognition. Our information calls it a primal survival skill, now kind of hijacked.
Absolutely critical for survival back then. Quickly identifying food, threats, social cues. It needed to be fast, automatic, reliable in that context.
But that context was information scarce. Today, we're drowning in information, especially online.
Exactly. And that constant flood can lead to cognitive fatigue. We start relying more on those fast, automatic mental shortcuts, system one thinking, which makes us vulnerable.
Vulnerable to manipulation by algorithms. Social media, search results, targeted ads. They learn our patterns.
They do. They learn our biases, what grabs our attention, and they feed us more of the same, creating filter bubbles, echo chambers, limiting what we see.
And they amplify our built-in cognitive biases, right? Like confirmation bias. We seek out stuff that confirms what we already believe. Filter bubbles make that easy.
Or the availability heuristic, we overestimate the importance of things that are easily recalled, like viral news or sensational stories.
And the illusion of control, thinking we're better at spotting fake news or deep fakes than we actually are.
Precisely. These biases, maybe useful shortcuts ancestrally, become liabilities online, easily exploited to spread misinformation or just keep us hooked.
And the constant stream of notifications, tailored feeds, emotionally charged content. It just leads to chronic overstimulation, attentional fatigue, makes deep focus really hard.
Tell me about it.
Right.
Some days it feels like my brain has 50 browser tabs open, all demanding attention. Our brains just weren't built for this constant digital onslaught.
So these amazing pattern recognition systems, crucial for our ancestors, are now kind of ill-suited for the digital world, potentially eroding critical thinking, making us anxious, prone to misinformation.
It's another major mismatch, with potentially serious consequences for how we understand the world and make decisions.
And this leads to the concept mentioned in our sources, the industrial identity loop, where the industrial diet messes with our brain function and industrial media exploits our pattern recognition, kind of conditioning us into patterns of consumption and thought.
That's the idea, a self-reinforcing cycle. Unhealthy eating impacts cognition and mood, making us perhaps more susceptible to the kind of information environment that keeps us consuming both food and media. Breaking free requires conscious effort.
Right. So we've painted a picture of the challenges rooted in this evolutionary mismatch. Now, how do we start reclaiming some agency, finding solutions? The information points toward personalized approaches like nutrigenomics and epigenetics, and also harnessing states like flow.
Exactly. It's about moving from understanding the problem to actively engaging with solutions, taking a more personalized, proactive role in managing our own biology and our interaction with the modern world.
Let's start with nutrigenomics and epigenetics. This sounds like the science of, well, you, moving beyond one-size-fits-all advice.
That's the essence of it. Recognizing we're all biologically unique, our genes interact with our environment, especially diet, in very individual ways.
So nutrigenetics is how our specific gene variations affect how we handle nutrients absorption, use, tolerances, even disease risk.
Right. And nutrigenomics is the flip side, how nutrients and other compounds in food actually influence the expression of our genes, what gets turned on or off.
And epigenetics ties into that. These are modifications around the DNA, influenced by diet, stress, toxins, that regulate gene activity but are potentially reversible.
Exactly. Think of genetics as the hardware, and epigenetics is the software that can be updated by lifestyle and environment. Together, these fields offer a framework for truly personalized nutrition.
Tailoring advice based on someone's unique genetic makeup, their microbiome, their metabolism, AI and machine learning are even helping to process all that complex data now.
The potential is huge to move beyond generic guidelines and offer recommendations that are optimized for an individual's biology, hopefully leading to better health outcomes and disease prevention.
Okay, this can get technical fast, but the core idea is that our individual genes do influence how we process food. The information gives specific examples: MTHFR and folate, APOE and cholesterol, Alzheimer's risk, FTO and obesity.
COMT and how we handle stress hormones and neurotransmitters, DAO and histamine breakdown, GST genes for detoxification, HLA genes for gluten sensitivity, the list goes on.
It really illustrates how variations in our genes can impact our nutritional needs, our sensitivities, our predispositions. It's not deterministic, but it provides valuable clues.
Precisely. Valuable insights for tailoring diet and lifestyle.
And our gut microbiome is right in the middle of all this, isn't it? Mediating gene-diet interactions.
Absolutely key. Our genes influence which microbes thrive in our gut, and the substances those microbes produce, metabolites like short-chain fatty acids, can then influence our biology, including our gene expression. It's a complex, dynamic interplay.
Diet changes the microbiome influences us. It's a feedback loop.
A crucial one. And disruptions, dysbiosis, are linked to so many health issues.
Then there's the epigenetic diet. The idea we can use food to consciously influence gene expression.
Yeah, through specific bioactive compounds, things like metal donors, folate, B12, choline, polyphenols like EGCG from green tea, resveratrol from grapes, curcumin from turmeric, sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts.
So eating these foods could potentially push our gene expression in a healthier direction.
That's the promise. It highlights the power of food not just as fuel, but as information that interacts with our genes. And other lifestyle factors like exercise and stress management have epigenetic effects too.
It really drives home that genes aren't destiny. We have influence through our choices. And this connects back to achieving clarity, right? Balancing neurotransmitters, reducing brain fog, maybe by improving gut health or supporting methylation.
Exactly. The potential to fine-tune our biology for better cognitive and metabolic function is there. And the reversibility of epigenetics is incredibly empowering. We can make changes.
Our info has another helpful table. Table 2, laying out some of these key gene SNPs and potential personalized approaches for cognitive and metabolic health. Lots of actionable ideas there.
It's a good summary, showing how genetic insights can translate into practical strategies for diet and lifestyle to support overall well-being.
Okay, shifting gears again. Let's talk about flow. That state of being completely absorbed, energized focus. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work.
Ah, yes, flow. That optimal experience where you're fully immersed, time distorts, you feel challenged but capable, and there's this intrinsic enjoyment.
The key components seem to be clear goals, immediate feedback, that balance between the challenge and your skill level may be pushing slightly beyond your comfort zone.
Around 4% beyond current ability is often cited as the sweet spot. Plus deep concentration, losing self-consciousness, feeling in control. It's a very distinct state.
And there's a neurobiology to it. Changes in brain waves, maybe quieting of the default mode network, that internal chatter.
Yes, shifts towards slower brain waves like alpha and theta are often seen. Modulation or suppression of the DMN seems key to losing that self-monitoring, ruminating aspect.
And maybe even a temporary downregulation of parts of the prefrontal cortex, transient hypofrontality, allowing for more automatic, intuitive action.
That's one hypothesis, though it's complex and might depend on the specific task, but certainly the brain reorganizes its resources. Plus, you get a neurochemical cocktail release, dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, and anandamide, contributing to the focus, motivation, and feel-good aspects.
It sounds like a really efficient, sustainable way to pay attention. Less effortful than forcing concentration.
Exactly. It's less draining, can be maintained longer, and it generates positive emotions, which reinforces the behavior.
And even boredom can be useful, as a trigger to seek the right challenge level to enter flow.
Potentially, yes. Flow exists in that channel between boredom, under-challenged, and anxiety, over-challenged. Boredom signals you need to up the ante.
It makes you wonder about ancestral flow. Activities like hunting, foraging, crafting tools, even storytelling or rituals, they seem tailor-made for flow states.
Very likely deeply embedded in our evolution. Those activities demanded intense focus, had clear goals, immediate feedback, required skill. They were inherently purposeful and engaging. Modern life, with its constant distractions and often mismatched challenges, can easily disrupt this.
But we can cultivate flow today consciously in lots of different activities.
Absolutely. By setting clear goals, ensuring feedback, finding that challenge-skill balance, minimizing distractions, focusing on activities we intrinsically enjoy.
And the benefits go beyond just feeling good in the moment. Neuroplasticity, building resilience.
Yes, regularly accessing flow states can literally rewire the brain for the better, enhancing learning, skill acquisition, emotional regulation. It can be an antidote to stress-induced negative plasticity.
Improving mental health, counteracting apathy, anxiety, depression. Makes sense.
Increases life satisfaction, motivation. It can even provide respite in conditions like PTSD, for example, through things like ocean therapy.
Now, how does flow differ from hyperfocus? They sound similar.
Similarities, yes. Deep absorption, heightened attention. But key differences. Flow usually feels more voluntary, more controlled. Hyperfocus can feel like your attention is captured, sometimes against your will.
And flow is typically aligned with productive goals, while hyperfocus might be on something less useful.
Often, yes. Also, in flow, you usually retain awareness of basic needs. In hyperfocus, you might neglect them. Flow is intrinsically rewarding. Hyperfocus might be driven more by novelty or immediate gratification. Flow is generally positive for well-being. Chronic hyperfocus can risk burnout.
Interesting distinction. So the information suggests flow might be a fundamental human need, and maybe lacking it contributes to modern malaise.
It's a compelling idea.
Yeah.
That being chronically deprived of this state of deep engagement could leave us feeling disengaged, unfulfilled. Reclaiming flow could be vital for authentic well-being.
So how do we support our brains for flow, nutrition and lifestyle-wise?
Well, the brain-boosting foods definitely help. Omega-3s, especially DHA from fatty fish, walnuts, flax, crucial for cell membranes, communication, plasticity.
Antioxidants, blueberries, dark chocolate, turmeric, green tea, fighting oxidative stress.
Exactly. Vitamins and minerals from leafy greens, nuts, seeds, healthy fats from avocados, providing the raw materials and protection the brain needs for optimal function.
And the basics: hydration, balanced whole foods diet, mindful eating, they create the foundation.
Absolutely crucial. Regulating energy, mood, setting the stage for focus.
And predictably, UPFs are bad news for flow potential.
Completely undermine it. Neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, cognitive decline, messing with reward circuits. UPFs work directly against the brain state needed for flow.
And other lifestyle factors: exercise, mindfulness, sleep.
All key. Exercise boosts, BDNF, mood, energy. Mindfulness trains attention, quiets the DMN. Sleep is essential for clearing waste, consolidating memory, regulating emotion. They all support the capacity for focus and flow.
So it's really a holistic picture, integrating diet, lifestyle, maybe even personalized insights from nutrigenomics about things like caffeine metabolism or B vitamin needs.
And nurturing a healthy gut microbiome through diet is foundational too. It all works together synergistically to optimize brain function and make flow more accessible.
Okay, finally, the sources touch on psychedelics as potential catalysts for metabolic and narrative rewiring, a really hot topic right now.
It is. There's a definite resurgence in research, looking at them not just for understanding consciousness, but as tools to potentially help shift deeply ingrained patterns, especially in mental health. The key insight here is catalyst, not magic wand.
Neurobiologically, what's going on? Primarily the serotonin system.
Yes, particularly strong interaction with the 5-HT2A receptors, which are dense in higher-order brain regions. This seems to modulate brain network activity. like suppressing the default mode network.
That quieting of the self network, linked to ego dissolution, feelings of unity.
Exactly. And that experience often correlates with positive therapeutic outcomes. There's also the idea of relaxed predictive coding, filters the Rebus model, allowing more sensory information in, leading to cognitive expansion, increased brain entropy or flexibility,
More connections, altered perceptions.
increased neural crosstalk, more global brain connectivity, and crucially, promotion of neuroplasticity changes in neuronal structure, increased BDNF, creating this potential window of plasticity for days or weeks afterwards, allowing for new learning and change. They also affect emotional processing, potentially reducing fear responses.
Which leads to the therapeutic applications, being studied for PTSD, depression, addiction, often combined with therapy.
Right, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. MDMA for PTSD shows promise in reducing fear, increasing connection, facilitating trauma processing. Psilocybin for depression seems to work by disrupting rumination, promoting emotional breakthroughs, maybe linked to those mystical-type experiences.
And addiction. Psilocybin for alcohol and smoking cessation. Ayahuasca and ibogaine have traditional uses and are being studied too.
Yeah, potentially by disrupting reward pathways, enhancing motivation, providing insights. And there's growing interest in eating disorders too.
How might they help there?
Potentially by disrupting rigid thinking patterns around food and body image, enhancing emotional processing and interoception awareness of internal body states, promoting self-acceptance, targeting underlying serotonin dysregulation. Preliminary findings in small studies for anorexia and binge eating disorders seem promising, showing shifts in body perception, reduced symptoms.
So the idea is they might help unlearn restrictive rules or trauma scripts by creating that flexibility and plasticity.
That's the hope, yes. Offering a chance to rewrite those narratives.
But context is everything here, isn't it? Ritual, intention, integration, set and setting.
Absolutely paramount. Structured use, whether clinical or traditional ritualistic settings, involves preparation, setting intentions, education, building rapport, sometimes dietary restrictions like the dieta with ayahuasca, then a guided experience, and crucially, integration afterwards, making sense of the insights, translating them into lasting change. That integration piece seems key for long-term benefits.
Versus purely recreational use, which might be more variable.
Generally, yes, though intention and mindfulness can enhance meaning even in less structured settings. But the therapeutic potential really seems tied to that structured approach with integration, and setting clear intentions beforehand provides direction and anchor and seems to correlate with better outcomes.
And there are ethical and safety concerns, especially with the rise of retreats.
Huge concerns. Need for qualified facilitators, proper screening, psychological support, cultural sensitivity, avoiding appropriation. It's crucial to have ethical guidelines, transparency, harm reduction strategies as this field grows.
Interestingly, the sources also mention a link between psychedelics and feeling more connected to nature.
Yes, that enhanced feeling of interconnectedness often extends to the natural world. Ego dissolution might play a role. Blurring the self-other boundary allows for that feeling of unity with nature. Studies show increases in nature-relatedness scales after psychedelic experiences, often lasting. Maybe diminishing the ego allows a reconnection with a more ancestral sense of belonging to the environment.
So, thinking of them as catalysts for clarity, not just a reset button.
Exactly. Catalyst is a better word. They don't just wipe the slate clean. They initiate a process, open that window for neuroadaptive learning and psychological integration that unfold over time. The journey metaphor fits better than trip.
How might that apply to metabolic clarity?
Maybe by disrupting compulsive eating patterns, increasing awareness of internal hungerfulness cues, interoception, improving body image, helping address the emotional drivers behind disordered eating,
And for narrative clarity.
facilitating insight into personal history, beliefs, emotions, helping reframe traumatic memories or limiting self-narratives, reconnecting people with their authentic values and sense of purpose, promoting emotional release and breakthroughs.
But always with that emphasis on integration afterwards to make it stick.
Integration is where the real work happens. The psychedelic experience might open the door, but integration is walking through it and rebuilding things.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've journeyed from our deep ancestral past through the Neolithic changes right into the complexities of the modern industrial world, really seeing how our biology, our environment, and our well-being are just deeply interwoven.
We saw the health trade-offs of the Neolithic nutritional challenges, new diseases, but also the incredible ancestral wisdom in food processing that emerged.
Then the even more acute gene-diet mismatch with modern ultra-processed foods impacting both metabolic and cognitive health. and how our primal pattern recognition gets exploited by the modern digital environment.
But it's not all doom and gloom. We explored ways to reclaim agency, personalized nutrition through understanding our own genetics and epigenetics, cultivating focus and engagement through flow states.
And the potential, carefully considered, of psychedelics as catalysts to help break ingrained patterns and foster new clarity, both metabolically and narratively, within supportive contexts.
It really seems the path forward involves blending that ancestral wisdom, the importance of whole foods, variety, mindful processing, connection with modern scientific understanding of our biology, our brains, and our environment.
Using that integrated knowledge to navigate the challenges of today and hopefully forge a healthier, more engaged, more fulfilling future.
Well said. It's about informed choices, grounded in both where we came from and what we know now.
Well, thank you for coming along on this deep dive with us today, exploring these foundations of well-being. We covered a huge amount of ground evolution, diet, cognition, modern challenges, potential
From
solutions.
Paleolithic bones to brain scans and psychedelics, it's quite a story.
What really strikes me is just how connected everything is. Diet impacts the brain, environment shapes thought, understanding our biology empowers choice. It's all linked.
That interconnectedness is definitely a key takeaway. Nothing happens in isolation.
So maybe something for you to think about as you go about your day. How might some of these ideas apply in your own life? Are there small changes you could explore, maybe in your diet or your relationship with technology? Or perhaps finding more activities that get you into that state of flow?
Or maybe it sparked an interest in learning more about your own unique genetics or the ongoing research into psychedelic therapy. Food for thought, definitely.
Absolutely. We hope you'll continue your own exploration, and please do let us know what other topics you'd like us to tackle in a future deep dive. For now, here's to staying curious and pursuing that deeper understanding.